Let's consider what you had to say in summarizing the points that are made in the letter. And take a look at it carefully. I told you try to get it down to about 6 points. I got it down to a little bit less that I'll share with you in a minute. But notice he starts out talking, it's almost like you get a summary right at the top. The death penalty is unfair, costly, not as tough as crime as you think. Kind of a summary of all the points. But if you look at it, makes a point, are death penalty laws fair? Is it in our interest to pass them? Okay, two different questions. He says the answer is no. The answer to both questions is no. And goes on to explain, he talks about fairness. He talks about, is it in our interest to pass them? With regard to fairness, he mentions that there have been studies done. Well, first of all, he starts out saying, that it's really well drawn, to limit the number of cases that the death penalty would be applied to. Not sure that that's, a critical point. Goes on and talks about, the fact that next paragraph, there are even fewer cases. So really doesn't apply to very many cases. It's very carefully done. Seems to be kind of an important point. Let me just flip the page. I thought I was going to flip the page. Let me try flipping the page. Okay, so the first point that I noted was the death penalty would only be applied in very few cases. Okay, let's go back and see where we're up to. Now, let's get down here to the paragraph that's over here. Yet other states, have careful laws and good intentions too. Even so, studies show death penalty discriminates by race. Goes on to say. So that looks like a second point that he's making. The next 2 or 3 paragraphs. Okay. Death penalties unfairly applied to minorities. I mean, you guys could have had a few more assumptions. That's okay. Now for self-interest, he's turning to another point, the point of whether it's in your interest or not. He goes, you think it's cheaper to kill criminals than to keep them around for 40 years. I guess he thinks they're going to live about 40 years after they've committed the crime. I don't know where he got the number, but I guess it's certainly possible. And then he goes on, about the costly appeals process and, how it takes forever, it takes a long time, and we spend a lot of tax dollars on it. So there he seems to be making a point that I kind of summarize as, the death penalty is more costly than the alternative of life imprisonment. And I think from that, we kind of got the case that he's making, and I think this is the case, the point that he's ultimately trying to convince us of is that the death penalty should not be implemented, or the death penalty isn't a good idea. Now, let's not pass judgment on this. Maybe you don't agree with the points the guy is making. Maybe you think there's a problem with it, but I really want to contrast this with that last argument. And I think there are a few points or the last example, the example about the flag burning. And first of all, we see a difference. That this argument cites specific facts, a lack of fairness in applying the death penalty. And it cites a fact about the cost of implementing the death penalty in opposing it. That is, this guy is not attacking people who are in favor of the death penalty, but rather he's trying to point out that there are certain problems in the death penalty, whether you agree with him or not. But I think you can see the difference between the kind of case that he's making for his point and the case that's being made earlier. And people think that a lot of other considerations outweigh these, that they're more important. That is, fairness is, is important but not quite as important, or the cost of doing it, they might, the least of that is they might think there are other considerations, justice, punishment, whatever. But they're going to clearly grant that these considerations are at least relevant to supporting or opposing the death penalty, in contrast to the points that were being made in example 1.1 about the flag burning. These are at least things that are being cited in defense of a point. And I think in general, I'm inclined to think that this argument, I'm not saying that it's a good argument, but there is an argument in this passage, and I think it's a better kind of argument than the one in the last passage. Now, what I'd like you to do is take out the points that you made, if you haven't done this so far, and see in your summary, the points summarizing the position, how did you do? Did you get all those things, or did you think that I didn't have enough information, too much information? Look at it, because I think it's a very important skill that you get, especially in trying to analyze arguments, being able to summarize things. And it's a good skill in school and in life in general, being able to, whether it's a professor in a course is telling you something, whether it's a boss or a friend, it's good to be able to take notes and make a summary of what's done. And making a summary or taking notes is not the same as dictating, that is, writing down everything the person had to say.